You're listening to FFOP Radio.
Reach the and welcome to the show. My name is Dave, and this is the Reviewniverse, where we're going to review something, but let me introduce who we are. Sitting across from the desk, as usual, Chris is over there.
I am here.
So this is just us.
Which is strange.
It is a little strange, but, whatever, it's fine. So we're going to be reviewing, so here's the thing. Lovecraft is one of my favorite authors, as everybody probably knows. After he died, August Derleth, another writer in that circle, basically commandeered a bunch of Lovecraft stuff. And even though it should have been public domain, there was some sketchy stuff going on. Moral of the story is August Derleth wrote a bunch of stories supposedly based off of Lovecraft fragments. But I cannot verify how much of that is true. I would say anywhere between 100 and 99% of what we are about to discuss is Derleth.
Well, it says, I feel like when it says who the author is, it says him and H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I would not be reading August Derleth's stuff if it weren't under the auspices of having a kernel of a Lovecraft story in there.
Yeah.
But whatever, here's where we're at. And so, I'm going to be talking about the short story, The Shadow in the Attic. This was published in 1964 by Arkham House, written by August Derleth, mostly and supposedly H.P. Lovecraft. But for my money, this is just the worst Lovecraft fan fiction. I've read a lot of Lovecraft inspired stories, collections, and what are they called? Those big collections of sci-fi.
Like anthologies?
Yeah, anthologies. Yeah, I've read a lot of Lovecraft anthologies, and there are a lot of people out there who can do a good job in that world, and there are a lot of people who can do a terrible job, but you cannot reproduce the way Lovecraft wrote.
Yes, I agree with that. I have only read Shadow over Innsmouth, which is nothing like this story, and there was another one that I read that we talked about on a show, and I cannot remember the name of it, which was a little more similar to this.
Was it The Outsider?
Possibly. Was the guy named Arthur or something?
The facts containing the late Arthur German and his family.
Yeah.
Where the guy was related to a white ape.
Yes, that one.
Yeah, but and that's the thing. Those are both very Lovecraftian stories because they're heavily focused on atmosphere over dialogue and all this other stuff. But whatever. Let's get into the story. So, like I said, The Shadow in the Attic, supposedly based on a Lovecraft kernel or something. So our story revolves around a guy named Adam Duncan, and he's got this mean uncle named Uriah Garrison. And like the laziness starts right here because he's like, everybody said my uncle was mean and probably a warlock or this or that. And our protagonist's dad crossed Uriah somehow and died mysteriously smothered in his sleep.
Yeah.
Several hundred miles from where Uriah Garrison was. And in Lovecraft terms, like getting killed mysteriously, this is bullshit. Like he could have just been smothered by somebody in the area for his money. Like whatever. It's like so stupid. And then his aunt, who is his dad's sister, so also not related to Uriah, crossed him also, and she slipped down some stairs and died.
Yes. And then a neighbor had a heart attack.
Well, she dies later. But this is our setup for this dude. Is like he's just a mean old guy who might be a wizard, and people are whispering stuff. And that's our big departure from Lovecraft. Is like when August Derleth is doing these, like, oh, people whisper this, that, or the other. It's nothing. Like, he's not imparting any even description of what's going on. He's like, oh, they just think he's a bad guy.
Yeah, like they question sanity, and that's pretty much it.
And it's like based off of what? Because like in Lovecraft stories, he'll come out and tell you, like, yeah, he was doing occult rituals, and there was always these weird noises and weird smells. And like in Charles Dexter Ward, he's like raising people from the dead, and people are hearing and seeing and smelling this shit. And in this story, they're just like, yeah, nobody much liked him.
He was standoffish.
Like, yeah, it's basically so gossip says he's maybe magical. And one thing about the story that is at least semi-interesting is since it takes place in the 60s and Lovecraft, stopped writing around his death circa 1929 or whatever, I forget. It does show a bit of development because he talks about the Aylesbury Pike, which is a well-known Lovecraft landmark, but he talked about the expansion of Arkham.
Oh, yeah.
So that I thought at least was interesting because like at least he was able to give some reality to it where like, progress and time, people will march and money will push out old witch haunts and yada, yada, yada. So I thought that was kind of cool at the very least. So the basis of the story is like this hackneyed, same shit you've heard a zillion times. Uncle Uriah dies. Adam is his nephew, and for whatever reason, even though there was a falling out with the family after 2 family members died based on this superstitious bullshit, he still sent him birthday and Christmas cards every once in a while.
Well, probably with that, there's nobody else left, I'll get whatever he has. Like that kind of thought in the back of his
But it's
head.
not explained. He's just like, oh, you know what? I sent him some cards.
Yeah.
He never wrote back, so that's what that is. But that's the thing. It's just like the weakest gossamer thread of justification for why the trope is happening. Because Uncle dies. He says, hey, good news. You can have this property and this house. The only stipulation is you've got to spend the first summer after I die in it. So it's a little longer than you have to spend a night in my creepy old house.
Right. It's 90 days.
Solid 90 days. And then there's like time wasted in being like, well, if you can't get there June 1st, it's a solid 90 calendar days from this, that, or the other.
This
Who gives a fuck?
This story starts off so slow, and the description and the run-on sentences are so long, and then toward the end, it just speeds through like a fucking train.
Yeah, it's so stupid. So, but whatever. Like, so we're getting into a little bit of the weirdness, and one of the weird things that regards to the house is the cleaning lady.
Yeah.
And so the 2 things about the house: the cleaning lady was always there working at night only, and the attic room constantly locked. So why the cleaning lady? Why does she clean is the thing, because she like, I'm going to drop some knowledge on you later and it'll make you go, why the fuck is this character relegated to a simple cleaning lady? It'll blow your fucking mind.
Yeah.
But whatever. So he talks to the lawyer, Mr. Saltonstall, and he's like, because he gets there and the house is totally clean. And he's like, well, that's pretty cool. My uncle's been dead 3 months and the place is still clean. So the lawyer's like, I don't know. If there was another key, maybe, maybe not. I have no fucking idea.
Right. I'm just the lawyer that has his will.
Yeah. And one of the other things so Lovecraft, when someone would die mysteriously, it would be some old-timey sounding thing because it was still plausible. The interpretation that August took in this story is the uncle died of senility in under a week.
Right. They're like, oh, he was fine. And then he just went out of nowhere. He started going downhill, and a week later he was dead.
Yeah. It's like, oh man, so crazy. So he just started going crazy. Everyone always thought he was crazy. And then he actually did go crazy and died in a week. And so whatever, we talk about more of his occult studies, and he's got this big library in the house and stuff.
Well, the whole thing with, I wrote something about how if the lawyer always said he'd never been at the house before, and then he talked about how all those books are in his library. How did
he said he'd been there once or twice. The lawyer had been there once or twice.
Oh, okay.
So, but so whatever. Then there's like a bunch of garbage talk about utilities, and he's like, oh, the plumbing is ancient and it never got electricity, but it needs a phone. So we went down and got a phone and had it installed. It's like, holy fuck, who gives a shit?
Who cares?
But it becomes important to the story later. And here's another part that is a wild divergence from Lovecraft to Derleth. Lovecraft had reverence for the past and for the architecture and for all of everything that was old-timey Arkham in his mind. Like antiquated revolutionary style bullshit was his jam. And our character Adam Duncan hates all that shit. He wants to sell the house. He hates the house. He just wants money.
He just wants to sell the land.
Yeah, he wants to move out. And he's like, this place sucks and it's old and Arkham's getting too big and it's stupid. And I'm like, that's completely the opposite of every Lovecraft character ever. So it's like constant clashes with the established world.
Yeah.
Different dude. So we talk about his fiance, Rhoda. Mm-hmm. So the first day he goes out there and gets all of this stuff done. He goes there, finds a clean house, goes and gets a telephone installed the same day. While he's out, he sends some telegrams to his fiance, Rhoda, and a professor.
His mother.
And he's doing some sort of research for his dissertation. It doesn't even fucking matter.
No, he's an English professor. He's doing dissertation on something.
Yeah. So, it spends a lot of time talking about this fucking boring ass research project. He's like, oh, that's how I'll keep myself busy for these 90
I'll
days.
go to the Miskatonic Library.
So whatever. So, bam, next day, Rhoda shows up and she's like, hey, it's me. And immediately is forced into so many roles. So she's going to be the damsel in distress, but she's also playing the semi-character of the dog or cat that barks at the ghost that only they can see before it shows itself. So the whole time she's there is just a nonstop, like, this place is evil and it's scary and let's get out of here. And he's like, no, I want to, 90 days and I'll get money and yada, yada, yada. But it's so tired and haggard, and it's just like it's the first thing that comes out of her mouth. It's hey,
she
I'm
walks
here.
Over the threshold and is like,
I hate this place. Character development. It's just there's ghosts here. P.S. It's scary. So we spend a little time hearing about how scary the house is and all this stupid shit. Keep in mind, this is still the first.
It's the next day.
The next day, but it's the first full day he's been there. Because I assume he didn't arrive first thing in the morning. Whatever. So he's like, all right, let's... another thing they do, these characters are doing that Lovecraft characters never do, is Adam talks about going out to a fancy dinner. Mm. He goes out and buys a bunch of shit, supplies to bring back to the house. Lovecraft wrote characters that were always just him. And they were always desperately poor like he was. So the fact that this guy, our main character, is like, I went to this fancy place and we go blah, blah, blah. And then when the fiance shows up, they go to this fancy French restaurant.
Right.
And I'm like, this is not it. If you're a Lovecraft fan, you're used to the protagonist being poor and having to pinch a penny, which is 9 times out of 10 how they get into their predicament.
Yeah.
The Shadow over Innsmouth is about a guy trying to save money on a bus fare, essentially.
Yeah. Well, and another thing that I hate when books and stuff do this, where they mention, he went to go sleep in the uncle's bedroom instead of the guest bedroom. Now, assuming that the uncle died in his room, why would you do that?
Well, it's been 3 months.
Still.
And the house was super clean.
I would not sleep in a room where my family member died. I would sleep in the guest bedroom because nobody died in there, presumably.
But that's the thing. He's not a superstitious person. And especially in Arkham, even if it's by the Aylesbury Park or whatever, this house is a couple 100 years old. Mm. So every house in Arkham has had dozens of people die in them.
Yeah, I guess so.
So it's who gives a shit? It's just par for the course. But it's glossed over here because the writing is so terrible.
Yeah.
But interesting note, dude Adam sleeps in the uncle's room and makes fiance Rhoda sleep in the room directly underneath him.
Yeah, in the guest room. The guest, whatever. Yeah.
Which is, whatever. Since this was written in the 60s, it's a product of that time. Keep in mind, Lovecraft protagonists never had romantic entanglements. So the fact that a woman is here at all is strange. So,
but then he also makes mention in the story, like, oh, she slept in the room down there, but she's had tendencies to, sleep with me or want to sleep with me or whatever. Like,
well, yeah, that's the weird thing about, because it's the 60s and he's a hack writing for a 60s audience. Like, this is still I Love Lucy era, where before you're married, you slept in separate beds in pop culture because nobody was fucking anybody. Wink, wink.
Allegedly.
But that's the thing. So I feel so bad for these two idiots, because she can't sleep because it's a creepy old house, and he can't sleep because she keeps moving around in the room under him. But, he finally drifts off, and then around midnight, the most insane shit happens. So, wakes up at midnight, he rolls over in the darkness, inexplicably reaches out his hand and grabs a mystery boob.
Yeah.
He just grabs a titty in the darkness. And he's like, whoa, what's with all that? And just as quickly as it happens, the person who it is attached to slips from the room and is gone.
Yeah.
And our dude's just like, whoa.
That's weird.
Huh.
But then automatically knew it wasn't Rhoda.
Yeah, he's like, okay, so check it out. He says, I knew it wasn't Rhoda, even though she tended to want to come up and bang him every once in a while. God forbid.
But the feel of it was different. And the look of it, even though he shouldn't have been able to see it because it was dark.
Well, it was a horrifying description of a fried egg on a nail. Like how the nipple was big and it was all gross and limp and like a sad sack of rice paper or whatever.
Flaccid. He said it was flaccid.
Yeah, such a what a left turn for a Lovecraft story. Again, just what the, even in Dreams in the Witch House, there is a witch and she's the only female character aside from Asenath Waite, who isn't technically female if you want to get into it. But the fact that, and Lilith, which we'll get into later, but whatever. So he grabs the boob and he's like, well, that was weird. He goes into the hallway and he stops to listen. And the silence of the house is broken by a shrill, terrifying scream, to which our protagonist does jack shit.
Yeah.
He stands there. He waits. He gets back in bed. He spends an hour listening.
It's like a red herring.
It's such bullshit. In a Lovecraft story, what would happen is if something terrifying like that happened, he would faint and wake up with something happening. But that's not happening here. Or even let's take it to the extreme, Howard, what's his name? Not Howard Lovecraft, but oh God, he wrote Conan. Robert E. Howard.
Yeah.
Robert E. Howard inspired Lovecraft story like The Shadow over Innsmouth. There would be some proactive something happening. But he's just I walked out of my room, heard this bone-chilling scream, and I went back to bed.
What else?
So there's that. So he wakes up in the morning, and Rhoda's in the kitchen making breakfast. They don't say hi to each other. Her job is nothing but to move the story along. We know nothing about her personally. She immediately started jumping into about how the house was yada, yada, yada. We know nothing about her. So at this breakfast table, she goes, I saw the cleaning lady.
Or I saw a woman in the house.
Yeah, she said, I saw a woman in the house. And he answers immediately. And he's like, I know, right? And I'm like, what the fuck? So, and the fact that they're totally fine with it. There's a mystery of maybe a cleaning woman, maybe not.
Well, she's but she was young, but she wasn't really young.
Yeah, so they describe her as feeling old, and here's the thing. The way that she describes or they both describe eventually, is this old feeling woman with a rubbery face that does not change expression in the slightest.
Yep.
And
Emotionless and all that crap.
Immediately I go, oh fuck, obviously that's a mask, which is a callback, or at least to me, it is a reference to The Whisper in Darkness, because the way that the big baddie in that story goes down is it basically kills Akeley, the guy living in the farm who our main character's been talking with, and put his head or his brain in a jar and wore a mask, even though it was essentially a giant fungus crab. So that's what we're doing here again, except it's infinitely stupider. Like, Lovecraft will tell you exactly how the story plays out in the first sentence. Derleth doesn't, but it still telegraphs it in a stupid way.
Right. Yeah. Like, I knew that this woman was not what we would have assumed that a cleaning woman was by like the first
So
instance.
Like take the thing on the doorstep, the Lovecraft story. It starts with the conclusion. The main character says, I literally just shot my friend 6 times in an asylum. He's dead. Gone forever. And here's the story of how that happened. And so you're hooked. But this story is like, well, it's a hackneyed old uncle left me some money or land or whatever. A haunted room, maybe something spooky, but only vaguely. And now this woman, and she just haunts the house, and that's all she does. So Rhoda is like making her plea again to get them to just jet. She's like, let's get out of here. This sucks. I hate it. It's smelly here. There's weird energy and whatever.
Well, and he didn't tell her that he saw her.
Yeah, he makes a point to remind himself mentally not to tell her about the boob he grabbed.
Right.
What? Obviously, no shit. Like, the fact that there is so much weird interpersonal stuff between two characters have got zero personalization.
Yeah.
He's like, I decided not to tell her that I woke up and instinctively reached out and honked a nipple. Like, what the fuck? Like, you guys wouldn't even sleep in the same room. Yeah, I think good job, Adam. Keep that to yourself if you want. But Jesus Christ. So whatever. Then Rhoda's just like out of there. She shows up to have dinner, slept in the room under him, made breakfast, and she's like, all right, see ya. I'm out.
Yeah, she was just going there to like see the house.
Yep. And she's like, hey, all right, I'll catch you later. And he's like, I won't forget to write. Smell you later. So another thing that happened during that day was like it was cloudy, and that's why it was making them a little gloomy or whatever. So the next day, he wakes up and he's like, yeah, the sun's out. I felt a lot less haunted. And so he decides to check out the attic. So even though he only knew it as a locked room, completely unlocked, he brought a bunch of keys, but it was totally unbarred. So he walks in and there is, nice little sunlight coming in, and he goes, oh, what the heck? What's all this crap? So he finds a chair, a woman's dress, and some woman's clothes, and a fucking rubber mask.
Yeah. And like tight rubber gloves and all this crazy shit. And it's like,
now here's the thing. Whether the mask is on somebody or off, it'll still have resembling or, characteristics that will transfer even when a face is not behind that rubber. So the fact that he mentions the mask, goes out of his way to say it also has hair, and then triples down to say it's not an old mask, but a fresh new mask, like it's being used, like the rubber is fresh. And he goes, I don't need to think about that.
I'll just leave this here and leave.
What the he's so whatever. He says, you know what? Fine. Fuck it. So, but this gave me a couple of vibes. So I thought maybe this took a little bit of inspiration from a woman named Blanche Monnier. So in the 1800s, she was born in 1849. In 1875, she wanted to marry this dude. And her family was like, no, we're going to pick the dude you marry. But she wanted to marry the dude she loved, who was just a poor lawyer. But her parents wanted money. She goes, fuck that. I'm going to do it. And then she disappeared. So from 1875 to 1901, no one knew shit about her. Her family said, yeah, she ran off with that lawyer. And the lawyer who didn't run off was like, no, that didn't happen. So an anonymous tip led the police to find her. That woman had been locked in her attic from 1875 to 1901 and was batshit insane.
Oh.
So that's what I thought. I got a little bit of vibes. She died in 1913, crazy as a loon in a madhouse.
Well, yeah.
But he sees the mask, and I'm also, again, getting Whisper in Darkness vibes, because every time a monster comes out of wherever they come from originally, and they can't be invisible, a la Wilbur Whateley's brother or whoever, and they don't have someone to hide them. They've got to put on a mask. And here we are. It's a fucking mask. But and he doesn't even say like, yeah, it even looks like her a little bit. No, doesn't even. No, it's like, whatever. I don't know. Whatever. So now we see the titular shadow in the attic. Very vague, like not Lovecraft indescribable vague, but like literally vague. It's just a shadow, an amorphous shadow on the wall.
Yeah, he makes it kind of sound like it's like a burn mark.
Yeah, so I likened it to when I was listening to the audiobook, like a nuclear shadow.
Yeah.
It's like a burn shadow, which he kind of describes it as because it looks like something that had come out of some place and just like charred the wood. But again, there's nothing scary about the shadow. It's just a vague shape that has no particular meaning to him, nor does it make any sense pictorially to him. He just says, eh.
You know, and throughout this story also, for a guy or a character, narrator, whatever, who isn't a superstitious person and says that the house is an inanimate object, he still says things like how he can feel that the house has heightened awareness or it has tension during certain times.
So that comes into play here because he basically looks at the shadow and tries to find where the source is. And when he turns around, he sees what he calls a mouse hole in the wall. And around it, in like red grease or something, are like all these weird symbols. And he goes out of his way to say they aren't like occult symbols. They're not like, witchcraft. They're just something indescribable. Like the fucking lamest shit.
Other dimensional design, he says.
Yeah. And Lovecraft would say something about them being either non-Euclidean or he would liken it to something.
Yeah.
Like he did in Dreams in the Witch House, which this part is fucking ripping off. So in Dreams in the Witch House, the witch, Ezra, I can't remember her name, but she's crazy and she uses essentially geometry to move through weird angles and travel through time in different dimensions. And that's what we're doing here, except a lot shittier. So the mouse hole surrounded by these these lame ass designs. Dreams of the Witch House, obviously some shit is going to come through there. And here's the thing, in Dreams of the Witch House, there was a hole in the wall that Gilman, the main character, stayed at. But it was a rat hole, and it actually led to a physical place and had nothing to do with the witchcraft markings that put him in another dimension. So the fact that he's ripping them off here and not understanding why they were both in Dreams in the Witch House, he's just conflating them, is ridiculous. Like in the Dreams in the Witch House, it's a place where Brown Jenkins lives or something. Like there's a physical space back there that has some weird goofy shit in it, but it has nothing to do with the place where Nyarlathotep essentially is, the black man of the woods who she communes with to like offer sacrifices and shit. But here it is clear as day. Like, yeah, the hole is necessary, as is the symbology around it. You know, whatever. I guess that, sure, great, fine. Who cares? And he says at this point, though, that like he feels like the attic is holding its breath.
Yeah.
And so you're always wondering, like, so is there somebody there when there's nobody there? But there isn't. It's clearly established that every time whoever we will find out later, the cleaning lady is there, she's got to wear that costume. And he's in such a small room, there's nowhere she could have hidden rather. So he's just like, yeah, there's no reason for that. I mean, if he's going to be superstitious, be superstitious. If you're not, don't. He's flip-flopping to be like, nah, women are stupid, but I feel spooked out, and then just kidding.
Yeah, he says things about women a lot, which I need to talk about later, because I think...
Yeah, we'll get to it, but he's like, oh, that's weird. It feels cosmic in here, and it has a little bit of a feeling of not From Beyond. Maybe From Beyond, I don't know. Where he feels all weird and cosmic, and like being in that room makes him feel like he's traveling through voids, which is also a little bit Dreams in the Witch House. Really ham-fistedly done. It's just like he feels weird for a couple of seconds, and our protagonist is so stupid that feeling weird a couple of times, like he brings it up quite often, that he's starting to question whether or not he's hallucinating constantly.
Yeah, he is always big into if he's assuming he's having hallucinations because he's awake.
Yeah, he's like, the boob thing might have been an hallucination, this, that. Well, like, what the hell are you doing? So whatever. He comes out of the attic and Rhoda calls. She's in Boston. And he's like, whoa, you didn't make it far. And she's like, well, I've been looking at books about sorcery and I think you should leave again. And it's the same spiel. I looked up in a book. It's spooky. Please leave. And he's like, no, the money will be married. Shut up. You're just an irrational woman.
Yeah.
So stupid.
Does he go to the neighbor next?
Yeah. So he calls the lawyer and he's like, hey, Mr. Saltonstall, what up with this place? And the lawyer's like, yeah, I've only been there like once or twice. Fucking guess what? Obvious advice. He says, talk to the neighbors. They live around the house 24/7, idiot. I've been there twice. I signed the papers. I met you like literally the other day. Talk to the fucking neighbors. So he says, great. I'll talk to exactly one. And so he does.
Just one.
Walks across the street, talk to the old dude, and he's like, hey, my name's such and such. I'm living in this house. What can you tell me? Not about my uncle. Not about the weird magical shit going on. Nope. Not about the house. He says, what can you tell me about the cleaning lady? And the guy's like, yeah, I don't know.
He's like, I wish I could tell you.
Yeah, never saw her come. Never saw her go. Sometimes you see her through a window. Pretty much it.
The end.
The guy's like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah. P.S. Didn't know your uncle. Only talked to him a couple times. Don't know if he's dead or alive. I don't believe that he's dead.
Yeah, he says, I don't think he's dead. And then it's nothing but like more shit talking and gossip. But it's all super vague and not like there's no cult things mentioned. Again, no smells, no sounds of spells, no chanting, no nothing. No earmarks of anyone calling the great old ones or any of that shit.
No, none of that. And this is when the neighbor had said that nobody has been over there since the neighbor went over there because he thought because she was going to yell at him about having a lady in the house.
Yeah, so this must have been back in the 40s then, because like who would do that? But a neighbor comes over to be like, you've got a lady living with you? And apparently he said nothing, but she mysteriously died.
She had a heart attack at her house from fear.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and then so another couple of things he brings up. The neighbor, he says, "Have you seen the blue light yet?" And it's like, "What?" Not brought up again. So just store that away. And then he asks him if anything strange has happened, and he goes, "Yeah, some strange stuff." Anyway, you want to hear some shit talking about your uncle? And he does. So Mrs. Barton was the woman who came around to berate the uncle, and he dies. You know, it's like whatever, no shit. Of course she's gonna die. So he starts talking about his uncle's library after he goes and talks to the neighbor. And this is a trope of Lovecraft's. Everybody in these stories always has a library, and you're going to have certain tomes. Possibly the Narcotic manuscripts or fragments thereof. You're definitely going to have a Necronomicon, either the Greek version or the John Dee's. You're going to have the Cult de Ghouls. You're going to have Vermis Mysterious. You're going to have these tomes that every crazy old wizard has in every Lovecraft story. Like even the Terrible Old Man had some of these things. And he's like so far removed. But whatever. It is a laundry list of books that I've never, ever been brought up in Lovecraft mythology before. He
read through because I listened to the audiobook and the narrator just listed all these things. I'm like, what is he making all these like up? Like I get.
Yeah. And as he is going through these books, he's finding this note trail essentially from all these bits and pieces that the uncle was putting together. And essentially what it leads him to believe is the concept of transference of soul or identity or consciousness from body to body to body, a la ripping off The Thing on the Doorstep. Because the crux of that was old wizard Waite put himself in his daughter and then killed his daughter in his body and then was trying to go on and on and on. This is that, but just infinitely shittier. Because in The Thing on the Doorstep, there was a lot of lore. It had to happen on a certain day. Things had to be done at certain places and rituals needed to be performed regardless of this, that, or the other. And this, it just feels like the longer you stay in the house, you just sort of soak it up like a sponge.
Yeah, and it seems like, I don't want to get, I guess we're getting closer toward the end of the story kind of, but like it seems like because of Rhoda's constant persistence of him leaving, it kind of tries to speed up the whole, like the house and the lady try to speed up the whole.
Yeah, because like during the phone call from when she calls from Boston, like he's already starting to feel animosity towards her.
Yeah.
He's like, she's so annoying. I just want to do this. Like, leave me the fuck alone. And he's like, you're a woman. I'm a man. And I want to feel or think that might be the uncle's influence as he sort of permeates. But again, we're getting no ritual. There's no citation from any book. Like, our character is completely disinterested in any lore or architecture. So all of the backstory that would have been woven throughout a Lovecraft story is not here. It is so anemic. Mm-hmm. And I'm just left grasping at straws. But this is also the part where he drops the "women aren't rational creatures" line. Yeah,
that's the first time he said it. Women simply aren't rational creatures.
Yeah.
He says that written down.
Yeah, he says, whatever. He's like, I can literally deal with this crazy hole in the attic and the shadow, possibly both stemming from a different dimension or plane of existence, solely with masculinity. Hangs up the phone on her.
See you later, lady.
So, whatever. We go that night, it's like night 2 or 3 or whatever. So you can hear the cleaning woman outside of his room. Like, she comes down from the attic, she goes right past his door and down the stairs. So he gets his nuts up and he's like, I'm going to talk to this cleaning lady. And it's this ridiculous game of pussyfooting back and forth. He's like out in the hall, back in his room, down the hall, up the hall, back to the hall, quietly doing this, questioning whether he should even talk to her, saying he's totally going to, whatever. So she's in the kitchen cleaning. And keep in mind, she is a cleaning lady, so she is definitely cleaning the house. They constantly talk about how clean the house is. So he's on the fence about talking to her. She's in the kitchen. Finally, she turns around. They have this really awkward couple of moments.
Well, before that, he's on the stairs and sees Uriah's spirit on.
Oh,
floating.
yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I forgot about that. It's fucking ridiculous. So he's in the hallway, and as he watches the maid goes down the stairs, he turns around, and there's a huge picture of his uncle. And the way he describes it is like a ghost river flows out of it and over him and down the stairs.
Yeah, like stops at his feet.
And he's just like, meh. Anyway, about this cleaning lady.
Let's just forget about that.
Jesus Christ. So yeah. And he goes down. They lock eyes for a few tense moments. There's more allusions to the fact she's wearing a fucking mask.
They say nothing.
They say literally nothing.
And he leaves.
And he's like, and he whimps and runs back up to his room, slams the door, and jumps into bed like a wuss.
Yeah, he says like her eyes are like full of passion and anger and all this crazy shit.
It's the craziest thing. The only thing about her that has movement or passion or feeling or anything is her eyes. And her face is like rubbery. And I don't know. So stupid. But he comes to a couple conclusions based off of nothing after he runs back to his room. He says, okay, things I know unassailably. This woman is a fucking monster. My uncle was some sort of warlock and now has her in some sort of bondage. Like, she is now his familiar or whatever you want to call it. She is under his control. And spoiler alert, it's come out. I can't keep it any longer. I've said it a couple of times already. It's Lilith. This is Lilith, the first woman that God made out of dirt, who went crazy and had sex with animals, who is directly from the horror at Red Hook. The cult of that story is based around Lilith. And here she is, trapped in domestic servitude, cleaning a dude's house.
See, you and I are coming to completely different conclusions about who is in charge of who. Yes. But let's continue.
Well, it really doesn't matter because no one has control over anything, for fuck's sake. So like literally right after that encounter, and he runs to his room, comes to that conclusion. He hears her come back up from the kitchen and go up to the attic. So he's like, time for another awkward encounter. So he comes out and sees that there's blue light coming from under the door of the attic. And he's like, oh, whoa.
It's that thing the neighbor talked
The thing
about.
from the guy. Yeah. Well, I don't know. What does it mean? I don't know. I never read a fucking book. At this point, the main character should have gotten bored and thumbed through a copy of the Necronomicon to find the exact thing he's going to be fucking dealing with. It happens so often, but whatever. Doesn't do it. So, goes up there, opens the door, finds that the blue light is coming from the mouse hole. And looks at the chair, sees the clothes, sees the mask. He touches it and it's warm. No shit.
Yeah, this just happened.
Like, I feel like the person who's writing this was writing as fast as they could because the room was filling with carbon monoxide and they were slowly succumbing to it. Like, August Derleth is such his prose aren't bad, but the way he writes, and there's no logic and no credit given to the reader, it fucking sucks. But whatever. So he's in there. The mask is warm. Obviously, Lilith popped out of it back into the hole. He feels weird and wants to jump into the hole. Because he gets that weird trippy feeling that he's in some other dimension again, and he wants to go through the hole. But a bunch of light starts coming out of the hole, and he runs back to his room again.
Yeah, he snaps out of whatever, quote unquote trance he was in and was like, gotta go to bed.
Yeah, he's constantly going out to check on things and then running back to his room like a scared child. Like, every time something freaky happens in the slightest, he's like, gotta get back to bed. And it's like, this is why Lovecraft would have people faint. Because having a protagonist do nonsensical shit when this could just as easily be wiped away as when the blue light started going crazy, he passed out.
Yeah.
But no, kept his wits about him, left the attic, stayed in the haunted house, went to his room.
And actually fell asleep.
Fell asleep. Had a dream. So in this dream, the mouse hole disgorges a cleaning woman who goes through a rapid shifting age thing.
Yeah.
So she's young and then old and then hot and then ugly and then a witch and then a blonde haired girl and all this stuff. And then she's wearing the mask at some point. And then the uncle comes through the hole, and this is as much description as we get as to what the magic that is going on here. So the cleaning thing comes out, all that weird shit happens. The uncle comes out and seems to invade his body. Or start to, and he wakes up. That's it. There's no sacrifice. There's no baby killed like in Dreams in the Witch House. There's no slime-covered altar. There's no nothing. He just comes out, and because he feels like he wants to, he does it. There's no cleansing bolt of lightning. It's just a weird feeling he gets that his uncle is trying to slip into him like a used pair of Crocs. So he wakes up all spooked. So Rhoda knocks on the door, and she's there. She's like, hey, you got to get the fuck out of here. And Adam, inexplicably, is now using plural pronouns.
Yeah, he says, we don't need you.
He says us. He says we don't need you. Leave us alone.
Yeah.
So obviously he's taken over to some degree. So fucking hacky.
Yeah.
The thing on the doorstep did this so much better. There is such nuance in the way that Edward Pickman Derby is slowly corrupted by Asenath, aka Wizard Waite from 2 generations ago, whereas this is just sharing a soda with someone. It's that easy.
It's crazy because, like I said before, it starts off so slow, and at the point of when he goes into the kitchen to see the housekeeper. Till the end of the book, it's
a rocket ship to the moon with no explanation.
Yeah.
So, and here, another thing that happens with that explanation and why. So Rhoda comes in, grabs all of his research for school, and she's like, you don't need this anymore, do you? And he's like, no, fuck it. Fuck you. Get out of here.
Yeah, basically. But we all, now after learning why she did that. Like, it makes sense. But yeah, when the first time I listened through it, I was like, why is she doing that? And then after the 6th time listening through, I'm like, oh, okay, all right. But
well, we'll get to it. So whatever.
he
He's
just like, see ya.
Yeah, and like again, since we are getting this written from this dude's perspective, he's so stupid. He's like, August Derleth, as the writer of this story, gives the reader, that is us, 0 intelligence credit. And he also gives his character 0 intelligence credit because he's like, I feel happy that I told her to fuck off. Like, I love her, but half of me now hates her. And I feel like calling myself my uncle's name and stupid shit like that.
Well, and he, yeah, because throughout the whole thing, he's always questioning basically everything. He's like giving himself, he's like, oh, I feel the house is doing X, but this is all just hallucinations. But I feel this. Like, he's an unreliable narrator.
Yeah, but in the thing about it is like his questioning results in no action.
Right.
Whenever somebody questions something, like especially if you think you're going insane, you do something. You change your behavior. But this is just like, nope, you got there, talked to the neighbor, did this, did that. Like, we're on a rocket ship to the moon and there's nothing happening. So after Rhoda comes and grabs all of his papers, we get a riveting section of the story where it talks about how he just hung around the house all day.
Yeah, he just felt great and he just relaxed and waited for the night to come.
I was hanging out, took a few naps. I was starting to get, bored, a little restless.
He's like, but I wasn't hungry for food. I was hungry for something else.
Why, the crazy thing about it is, like, he waits all day and then almost all night. Because it's like close to midnight where the freaky shit starts happening finally.
Yeah.
So he's sitting in his uncle's room because he was like downstairs and like, this doesn't feel right. I'm going to go up to my uncle's room and wait for Lilith there. So he goes up to his uncle's room, waits for Lilith. A horror Red Hook. Spooky ghosts show up. He's starting to feel weird.
Yeah.
Like the obscure process of being taken over that apparently requires nothing other than just wanting to is happening again.
Yeah.
Until he's like, well, then I smelled smoke. And I was like, and he shook himself out of it.
Yeah.
Essentially. He's like, I smelled smoke. And I was like, what? And I look out the window and there's Rhoda. And she was like, the house is on fire. And he's like, oh, by George. And I got out.
Yeah. She put a ladder out there for him to get out. And that was it.
That's it.
He snaps out of it like nothing happened.
Okay, so here's one of the things, like, I can liken this to also, like, in the lurking fear, there's a scene that takes place in a house where our main character has these 2 big muscly dudes as guards, and each one of them is stolen by the monsters in the night. And it's played out like kind of like this scene in that, like, there's a ladder involved, there's some spooky shit going on, but there was lore and there's something there and there's something tangible. This is just like, I'm sitting there, I was feeling weird, pretty like 85% sure I was hallucinating. There were ghosts like flowing into my mouth, and there were spectral demons, and Lilith was there with her withered old boobs. Like the amount of time that the narrator describes Lilith's body on multiple occasions is disconcerting. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? But whatever. The house burns down, and he's like, you know what? The lawyer was pretty cool about it. He's like, you know what? You tried, and it was forces beyond your control that you couldn't complete it.
The house burned down, so what else could you do?
So it's all yours. They sold it. They got married. It was all cool. Obviously, Rhoda admits, she's like, yeah, I burned the place down.
Yeah.
And then...
Which makes sense as to why she took all of his papers out, because if he didn't have those, then he wouldn't have a job probably.
And then basically tells the story we just read to Adam, who just lived it. And he's like, but you know how women are. They're hysterical as fuck. And I don't believe shit a woman says.
Women are fundamentally not rational creatures.
Yeah. So even though she was 100% right, she called it from a mile away. She's like, you know what? It was Uriah, blah, blah, blah. Like, I feel like she knew everything from all angles. And even though she laid it out, he's like, nah, I'll never know the answer. It's still a mystery. Like, so fucking dismissive. Yeah, women are rational creatures. And despite absolute facts that he's just like, you know what? It's just a mystery. And he refers to himself as two entities.
Yeah, he's like, sometimes I don't know if I'm Uriah or Adam.
Yeah, he even he says that to Rhoda. He's like, sometimes I don't know if I'm Adam or Uriah. And she's like, you're fucking crazy. He's like, I think I am. I'm definitely two people now, but I guess this is a mystery that will never be solved.
Yep. Even
though the facts are there, bitch. Like, this is the worst Lovecraftian protagonist. And that's why, I wanted to go over this because August Derleth has a lot of crap, and I feel like he gets a lot of shit, maybe unjustly. But then there are examples like this that are so clunky and shitty and like the dollar store Kroger brand value version of the Lovecraft shit. The list of books, none of which were the famous ones that we all know. Like mentions of an occult anything. Mm-hmm. No ritual, no specific god, no deity, no nothing. All the hallmarks of the Lovecraft without any of the Lovecraft. Like, this is an empty shell being puppeted by someone who's completely incompetent.
I took this story as Uriah wanted to be able to like live longer or whatever, and he summons Lilith as the like succubus to take, like, I took it as he was working for her to keep his spirit alive. So as long as he got people that she could take the life out of to keep herself young, that he would still be around. That's how I took it as she is the antagonist.
I mean, it doesn't matter one way or the other, whether, because to me, it felt like, because she, again, is cleaning the house above and beyond all and everything. The fact that you're getting the first woman ever created by God out of mud. And if you're going to be her servant, she ain't going to clean your fucking house.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, obviously he did that to make it like.
But here's the thing. There's nothing to go on. In no tome are they looking. Like, if they were to do like something from the Cult of Ghouls or whatever, the Necronomicon, do something either mainstream in this world or obscure, then you can justify, like, there was a spell that is so powerful it gave blah, 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 blah. Because in, like I said, the horror Red Hook, the cult that springs up there is based around Lilith. Mm-hmm. She's their figurehead or whatever. And Robert Sidham is the guy who gets involved and then realizes that it's a shitty idea, but too late. And there's not even any of that here. Like, in another hallmark of Lovecraft is unwittingly going along with something, knowing it might be dangerous, and then finding out too late that you've done all the necessary steps to do the thing. This guy, ignorant, doesn't even know anything is going on, and after it does, flat out refuses it did.
Right. But
like,
yeah.
This is right. Anti-Lovecraft. Like, the names, Aylesbury Pike, Arkham, Miskatonic, yada, yada, yada. All the semi-relevant world-building details are there, but the tone is gone. The through line is gone. The cosmic horror of it is gone.
Well, the more that I listened to it, the more made me, and I know you don't really, it doesn't matter, but all the people that died could have been, he was doing that with Lilith and stuff, taking all their souls. Well, yeah,
it could have been any form of magic, but the fact that Lilith never left, like, and that's the thing, all the neighbors, or at least the one, and it's implied that all of them would concur that she never left the house. She just stayed in the house and did his bidding, going in and out of the mouse hole with the shit around it. So she's, I realize you're probably wanting to believe that Lilith has a bigger role, but in the story, she's relegated to such a small role. And even that role is of subservience. Like in the IRL world, beyond all the magic, she's cleaning the house, and behind the scenes, she's probably operating that portal to get Uriah in and out of there.
Yeah,
but
maybe,
that's the thing.
yeah.
We don't know.
But it was interesting that basically Rhoda was the heroine in the story
but for no like justification.
No, but it's interesting that because you said it was 1964 that it was written. Like, how many women were the heroes in stories in the 60s?
Well, but that's the thing. She's not the hero.
Sure, she is.
Yeah, technically, yes, she is.
Because Adam isn't.
Well, yeah, definitely not. But the fact that she was able to do that and burn down the house, she
figured everything out and tried saving him from.
Well, that's the thing. She didn't figure anything out until the very end. Before that, she was just going off of intuition, and so she was just a fleshed out version of the dog in the ghost story.
I guess
she never issues any intelligent arguments other than it feels weird here.
Well, she did all that research in Boston, and he obviously ignored her because he thought she was batshit stupid.
Right, but then why? I guess whatever. There's no real answer probably for this. But if you're going to make her the only voice of reason, why constantly undercut her by being like, women are idiots, women are less than men. I don't know why I put up with this shit.
Because I think the author, or I don't know him, and the way that you talk about the author, like, I don't know his other stories, but I wonder if he is trying to, I don't want to say women empowerment, because it kind of is, but it kind of isn't, because he says shit about the women, but then has her be in my head, the heroine of the story.
It feels like, okay, so maybe this is another Lovecraft allegory. So as he aged, he became less hard-nosed upon his stances toward different minorities and or women and or whatever. And so he would oftentimes give characters of a different race or even these monsters, like toward this latter life, a quiet dignity, even though they were a monster. Like in the Mountains of Madness, the great old ones lived in Antarctica and cultivated the Shoggoths, which are these big monsters, these big jellies, to do all the work for them. Mm-hmm. And so they essentially created a slave class for themselves. And, in his own way, he was trying to be like, look, monsters, aliens, they're just like you and me. They also subjugate, in trying to make that tie of like, oh, they're just like you and me. They do horrible things to each other too, being tone deaf to that through line. Mm-hmm. This just feels like, and if that is the case, the worst executed way ever of doing that.
Yeah.
Like you're going to say, she is the hero, but constantly shit talked and constantly badmouthed and constantly told to fuck off and doing nothing more than being little more than annoyance and never getting any personal data out. Like we still don't know anything about her at the end of the story, other than the fact that she had a weird feeling and burnt down a house based on a hunch and some sorcery books, quote unquote, she found in Boston. And this all on top of the fact that Adam at one point during the story is like, there's no reference of my uncle anywhere in any library I've ever found. So what was she looking at?
Yeah.
What vein of sorcery was she looking into? Like, there are wizards all over Lovecraft country. Terrible Old Man's a wizard. Wizard Whately was a wizard. Wizards are all over the place, if you want to call them that. But they all stick to certain rules. And this was just like, it's a weird guy. He had some weird books. He did some weird stuff. And that all translates into vague body snatching. But still having the power over Lilith. And even if it's not the same Lilith from the Horror Red Hook or, the Torah.
Yeah, he only mentions the name once. He said succubus a lot.
Yeah, that's the thing. Lilith was a succubus. So that's another thing that sort of leads me to that is like that big, huge figure is just tossed off here as like a minor, like a Brown Jenkin to the witch of Dreams in the Witch House. But and that's the thing. It's just a lazy version. And what I want, if you're listening to this, what I want you to get out of this is like, Lovecraft stories are so good and nuanced. I want that to be the takeaway. Is like everybody has gotten exposed to Lovecraft culture, whether it's like little plushies of Cthulhu or yada yada yada. There's nothing that stands in for the genuine article. Like, even though he says nothing that feels like nothing, it's a great tapestry of atmosphere. This is nothing, feels like nothing, is nothing, no atmosphere, no nothing. It's a quick story about an emotionless man and a whiny woman saving each other, but not really.
He doesn't save her.
What I'm getting at is like moral of the story is there's nothing there. Like at the end of every Lovecraft story, there's always this sinking feeling of dread.
Yeah.
That even though all the people involved are possibly dead or possibly this or possibly that, the fact that you are now let in on the secret adds a little bit of the danger to you. Like in the Call of Cthulhu, all the characters are undone by what they learn. The Tale of Arthur German. That family is undone by finding out that family's horrible secret. And the fact that things like that still persist and that you don't know in what dark corners they lurk. Mm. This was just like, well, the house burned down. I'm half of my uncle now, and it's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if this were to be like rewritten by somebody and like the details, there was more detail in the latter part of the story than the beginning, or like something that made it more interesting. Cause like I got interested in it when the shit supposedly was supposed to start happening and then didn't. But like, I don't know. I liked the story overall, but I didn't know any of the other. As
far as like standing on its own two legs, if you don't want to compare it to the thing, it is basically aping and or stealing and or ripping off and or whatever. Because he put Lovecraft's name co-billed on this story. If anything, I would say at most, this was a one-line synopsis that Lovecraft may have tossed off in a drawer somewhere.
I think maybe he just put his name on there because of the Arkham and because he name dropped a lot of stuff.
That's what I'm saying. Like at most 1% of this is Lovecraft. Mm-hmm. At most. This is all latter-day Judeo-Christian based mythology. Like there is no cosmic anything. All those books that he mentions were like medieval tomes related to Christianity.
Oh yeah.
Like the point of Lovecraft is the insignificance of man in a chaotic, rulerless universe. And as soon as you start injecting like, well, it's actually not that bad, so buck up. And also, fire pretty much cures anything. And if you accidentally get half possessed, you're
still part you, kind of.
But yeah, that's just it. Like you're left at the end of the story feeling confused, not scared. There's no dread. You're not like, oh, I wonder what'll happen next, or if anything happens next.
Yeah, because even at the end, when he says, like, I don't know if I'm Adam or what the hell? Uriah.
He's just like,
And she's just like, well, it seems to have helped you a little.
Yeah, she's like, yeah, it's actually helped. So it's actually a happy ending. Like, Color Out of Space. In the end, they're flooding the valley where that alien color is for a reservoir. Mm-hmm. And you're left with a sense of dread, like, oh, fuck. What is that alien going to do to the town of Arkham? At the end of the Call of Cthulhu, Cthulhu ain't dead.
Yeah.
He's just disappeared. And if anyone happens to stumble upon it, like, and also it gives you that realization that shit's fucked. Like, we were accidentally made. The Whisper in Darkness, like, the fungus men from Yuggoth are still rolling around stealing people's brains. At the end of The Shadow over Innsmouth, like, he succumbs to the thing that he is and goes to live under the sea, biding their time for when they will overthrow humanity. Like, there's always a sense of like, yeah, it's over, but it's not over grand scheme because it never is.
Yeah, this just ends like, meh. Women,
like, yeah,
right?
I'm better with half my uncle in me, and that's just the way it is. But any of those other stories I've mentioned thus far are worth their weight in gold compared to this. Like the thing on the doorstep, everything in his mythology is so heavily laden with references to one another, which this tries to do. I've pointed out all the references I could conceivably generate, and maybe some of them aren't even there. I could have fabricated those based on just my own craziness. But it's the difference between like Asenath Waite being related to the Innsmouth Waits and then it being dropped basically there. Like her eyes are a little bulbous. She's from Innsmouth. Wink, wink. It's not like, oh yeah, so I went down to What's His Nuts and talked to Wilbur Whately and he was a giant monster and I was like, lol, so random. Like it's infinitely subtle in Lovecraft where it is completely explicit and like at times counterintuitive and contradictory.
Yeah.
It's like reading all the contradictions in the Bible back to back to back to back and going, what the fuck is going on here? Where is stable ground? But anyway, I'm going to recommend it because it's relatively short. And the good thing about all of this stuff now is like, since it's in the public domain by and large, you can get all of Lovecraft stories from hplovecraft.com in the written version. There are a zillion versions of audiobooks and YouTube videos and stuff. So however you want to ingest it, you can. And it's fun to sort of... Okay, I'll liken it to this. Reading a Lovecraft story is like going to a theme park that does it to the nines, like a horror theme park, where everything, every little detail is masterfully curated. Whereas like, at best, his best imitator is kind of like going to the Mr. Pibb version. And this, like August Derleth, is somewhere below that, like subterranean.
It's like a carnival that gets set up in a parking lot.
Yeah. It's a mall parking lot carnival because like they both promise fun and excitement and various themes, but one is just a tragic, hollow, pathetic shell. And it's not just because he's playing in someone else's sandbox. I hope I don't come off as that. It's not that he's playing in Lovecraft's world. Everybody can do that, and I encourage it. It's just that he does it so badly. And fucking with the source material is one thing, but having consistent characters is another. That extends beyond the genre, the flavor, the anything.
Mm-hmm.
The characters need to be believable human beings, and these aren't.
No.
Whatever. Do you recommend it?
Yeah, I recommend it. I mean, the YouTube, the audio version I listened to is like 43 minutes long, and I listened to it like 6 times just to get my head wrapped around like the quote-unquote details that I was trying to remember.
And it's got some things going for it. Like The Shadow in the Attic is definitely a Lovecraft title. And that's what I think was the only Lovecraft influence. Like The Haunter of the Dark, Lovecraft. The Thing on the Doorstep, like that Dagon,
yeah,
The Shadow over
Innsmouth.
Innsmouth.
Titles.
They all lead, they sort of give you a taste. And this had literally 1% to do with The Shadow. It all revolved around, number one, the fucking cleaning woman, and number two, the mouse hole. The Shadow was just simply something he looked at, couldn't describe, and then turned away from.
Yeah, it wasn't anything of anything.
It should have been the mouse hole in the attic. At least they tell you how shitty
The
it is
blue
right
glow
from the
in the
jump.
attic.
The blue light, and like, no, it's just not Lovecraft. And this really highlights how skeezy and shitty his tactics were, but I'll get into him more as time goes by. But I would like to thank you for coming, listening to this review of The Shadow in the Attic, the August Derleth, and possibly, allegedly, H.P. Lovecraft story. This has been an episode of The Universe, and we will catch you on another episode of whatever comes out on this channel. Bye-bye.
Bye.
or they try to.
Fistful of Podcasts Radio.